Hey there, loves. Welcome and welcome back to a cozy summer day in July. Today's vlog is a slow living kind of vlog, so I'm going to be working on my small veggie garden as well as cooking a delicious hearty soup that's just nice and cozy for these rainy days that we're having in Germany, as well as baking some fresh dinner rolls. And who does not love baking bread? Like, I love to bake bread. It's long and tedious, but it's also very relaxing. So let's get into today's video. If you guys remember, a few months back I did start a lettuce garden. Over here was supposed to be the iceberg lettuce, but this weird plant keeps growing, and because I don't know what it is, I'm just going to clear that out. Only the romaine lettuce was growing, but it's not growing really well. As you guys can see, the paprika has taken off. So what I'm going to do is remove everything from this planter box, just clean out the soil really well, and we're gonna go ahead and transplant the paprika. I'm probably going to start my lettuce garden again, but I'm going to try to do it indoors instead. So let's go ahead and clean out this planter box. As you guys can see, this plant that keeps growing, the roots grow really long, and I think maybe that's what was killing the other lettuces, but I won't know until I try again on the inside of the home. It was raining for the first portion of the morning. It's literally after 5 in the morning. It's not even 6 o'clock as yet, but I wanted to get outside to work on my small veggie garden before the rain came back down, because today we had in the forecast a thunderstorm, and I really wanted to get these plants transplanted before the rain came down so that I'd be able to say it's done and I don't have to worry about trying to transplant them after they've grown too much and risk the chance of them going into shock and dying. So I got outside really early to start the day, and I'm so glad that I did. A small centipede was living inside the planter box, which surprised me because the planter box is never on the ground. So I was quite shocked to find a centipede inside it. I'm not sure if I got it, but I hope I did, and if not, I hope it's gone before we do decide to sit out here and have lunch or breakfast. I'm trying to be as gentle as possible when removing the paprikas from the planter, because I do not want to damage their root system or put them in shock while transplanting them. And I'm so glad that I decided to transplant them when I did, because as you guys can see, their root systems were tangled. Like they were entwined so tightly that I really thought that I was going to have to just pop them apart, but I managed to get them separated without breaking too much of the roots off. And I thought I only had 3 paprika plants, but we have 4, so I'm excited to see them grow and provide us with some paprika for the home. I'm just really excited, and I'm going to keep you guys updated with the growth of them in future vlogs or videos. Until I'm able to purchase a trellis or make a trellis for my paprika plants, I'm just going to add this skewer to this one paprika in particular that keeps hanging over until I can find some real support for it. As soon as I was able to kind of clean up the area, the rain came right back down. I personally feel like the best time to bake bread is first thing in the morning. So I'm going to take out my scale, and it's an old-fashioned scale, but it works. I'm also going to take my stand mixer out, which I'm only going to use for a little while just to incorporate everything. I'm that person that likes to knead my bread by hand, so I just needed to get it started. This stand mixer is also a blender as well as a processor, so it's a 3-in-1. I absolutely love this stand mixer. Before using my equipment, I'm going to go ahead and wash and dry everything. For my dough mixture, I'm going to be using roughly about 600 grams of all-purpose flour. You can use bread flour if you guys want to, but I'm using all-purpose flour. 600 grams is about 5 cups of flour, but I'm going to start off with about 240 grams, which is 2 cups. Then I'm going to add about 67 to 68 grams of sugar, and that's about a third cup of sugar. I'm also going to add 1 teaspoon of salt and 2 packets of 7 grams of yeast, and I'm using dry yeast. So 77 is 14 grams, which is about 7 grams is 2 1/4, so which is about 4.5 teaspoons of yeast. So I'm going to use 2 packets. I'm going to combine everything with a whisk, just whisk everything together, and then we're going to work on our wet mixture. I'm going to be using my liquid butter. I just love using my liquid butter. It's easier for me to use, but of course, if you guys just have the sticks, use the sticks. I'm using about 85 grams of butter, which is about 6 tablespoons of butter. I'm also going to be using 355 milliliters of warm water, and that's about a cup and a half. You guys definitely try to convert it yourself. I'm just guessing because I'm so used to making bread, but just go ahead and try to convert it yourself just to make sure that I am correct. So 355 milliliters of water is 1.5 cups of water, and I'm going to warm that in the microwave for about 50-second intervals, and I did that about 3 times until it was warm like a baby's bottle. Then I'm just going to turn my machine on low and incorporate my wet with my dry ingredients. This is where the other cups of flours come in. You just want to go ahead and slowly incorporate the flour into your dough mixture. You don't want to add too much flour because you don't want it to be dry. This is a sticky dough mixture. I also went ahead and added in 1 egg to my dough mixture. Like I said, this dough is going to be sticky. I'm just using my machine to start it off, so if it is sticky to you guys, don't stress out. It's supposed to be sticky. So I'm going to add about a cup to the machine, and then I'm going to work in the other 2, maybe 1.5 cups of flour while I'm kneading it by hand. You can definitely incorporate all the flour by machine if you want to, and just let it mix until it becomes a dough ball, just meaning that all of the mixture is away from the bowl. So the mixture would basically just hang from the hook instead of being attached to the bowl. I personally just like to knead my bread by hand, personal preference. So definitely do what works for you guys. I'm going to be adding my flour to my tabletop, and I'm adding a generous amount of flour because my dough is still really sticky, and I'm just going to spread that all over the surface just to make sure that my dough does not stick to my tabletop. I'm also going to flour my hands to make sure the dough does not stick to my hands. I love making my bread dough sticky, and that's simply because it stays soft and fluffy very long. That's why I keep saying do not over add flour to this mixture. So I did add some flour on top, and I'm just going to keep folding that in until I think, or I feel like I've reached a cup and a half. I've been baking for a while, guys, so I can eyeball this, but if you can't, make sure you separate your 3 cups so that you don't go over the extra 3 cups of flour. So I'm just going to keep folding that in and kneading my dough until it is no longer sticky to my hands as well as the tabletop. Once your dough can form into a ball without sticking to your hands, then you know that it is ready. It's still sticky, but not sticking to your hands completely. We're going to oil our bowl with some olive oil, and I used about a tablespoon of olive oil. Just make sure you oil your bowl really, really well, and go ahead and place your dough inside the bowl in a warm corner for about an hour. I would say an hour, or until it doubles in size. I am placing mine in the oven with the light on. Do not turn the oven on, just the light on, so that warm air continues to go, because it's still really cold here in Germany. I need the oven to as a warm spot to help my dough rise. So I'm just going to cover this up with some saran wrap. I also placed a cloth over it, even though I didn't show you guys, and it just rested in the oven with the light on. I'm gonna go ahead and clean up my dishes as we wait for the dough to rise. I like to clean as I go because it makes me feel more relaxed, and I don't feel like I'm cleaning too much dishes at one time. And I also cannot function in a dirty home, especially a dirty kitchen. So I'm gonna go ahead and clean up everything and clean up my tabletops while we wait on the dough to rise. As you guys can see, our dough rised beautifully. Do not throw away that saran wrap with the dough on top. We're going to peel that dough off and use that. Yes, ma'am, we are. And we're also going to reuse that saran wrap later on for our second proofing. So once again, I'm going to lightly flour the tabletop. We don't really need too much flour. We just need to make sure that the dough does not stick to the tabletop. As you guys can see, the dough is not sticking to my hands or the tabletop, but I'm just going to lightly flour it just to make sure it is manageable. I'm also going to flour my rolling pin as well, just to make sure that the dough does not stick to the pin. I decided that I wanted to jazz up my yeast rolls by adding some cheese to it, so I just grated some cheddar cheese as well as a little bit of Gouda and Parmesan cheese. You guys don't have to use all those mixes, but that's what I added. I also added some garlic powder, maybe a tablespoon of garlic powder. I also added some rosemary, about a teaspoon or a little less than a teaspoon of rosemary. And then I went in and added about a tablespoon of my Italian seasoning. If you don't have Italian seasoning, just use a half a teaspoon of some parsley, some basil, and oregano, and that should be your Italian mix right there. You can also use herb de Provence if you don't have Italian seasoning. So I'm just going to mix that up really, really well, and then I'm going to spread that on the dough evenly. After I'm done spreading the cheese as even as I possibly can get it, I'm going to go in and lightly press it down into the dough so that it does not move when we fold it. We're going to fold the dough into thirds. So we're going to fold 1/3 to the center and the other third to the center. You can actually roll this up really tightly like a cinnamon roll and then just slice it up. Or you can do what I did, and I'm going to slice it up into about 20 pieces. This can make 20 to 24 rolls depending on how thick you cut your dough, but I'm going to cut it into 20 slices so that I can make almost a braided dough or a braided roll. I'm going to show you guys how I do it right now. So I'm going to take one piece and I'm going to make sure I press it down a little bit so that it does not open up too much and the cheese doesn't spill all over the place. Then I'm going to evenly slice it in 3. So I'm making 2 incisions so that we have 3 braids, and then we're just going to plait it. So we're going to take the right and place it under the center, then take the left and place it under the center, and we're going to keep doing that until we reach the end of our braid. When we've reached the end of the braid, you just want to pinch it so that it doesn't unravel, and then we're just going to roll it up. Of course, you don't have to do a braid. You can rope it or twist it so you can make an incision with 2 strips and just twist it up and roll it together, and you will get a similar look. After I'm done making all the rolls that can fit in my pan, I'm going to take the leftover and just slice them in half and rest them in a loaf pan, and then we're going to let it proof for another 30 minutes or until it doubles in size. Now I went ahead and greased my pan with butter, but you can also use oil. I just prefer to grease it with butter because the dough stays light brown to the bottom and it's really fluffy still. It doesn't give me a really prominent crust. But you can use oil as well if you like more of a darker crust. "30 minutes have passed, and as you guys can see, our dough rised beautifully. So now it's time to place it in the oven. Just as I take my buns out of the oven, I'm going to rub them down with a garlic infused butter, and it's just butter with some garlic powder as well as some Italian seasonings, and I'm just going to brush that all over the top and just allow it to cool. Now I'm going to bake my loaf because my oven is not really large, so I had to bake it separately. But afterwards, when everything is nice and cool, we are going to wrap up half of this and freeze it and just use it as needed because it's really only my husband and I, so we're not going to consume all of this very quickly. So to make sure that we keep it, we're going to freeze it. Make sure you're putting it in a freezer safe bag, and you can freeze this for up to 3 months and it's still fresh. Every time you take it out and let it defrost, it is still soft and fluffy, y'all. If you don't do anything in this video, try my yeast roll recipe. You will not regret it. It's much later in the day, so I'm going to be starting dinner, and we're going to be making a broccoli cheddar soup that is so good. If you guys have your own broccoli cheddar soup recipe, you can definitely make it how you usually make it, but this recipe right here, this recipe is delicious. So if you guys want to try my recipe, I am going to leave the link for it down below, which will take you guys to my Pinterest page where I share all of my recipes. So I'm starting off with some butter, and then I'm going to cook my onions down until they're translucent. Then I'm going to add some flour, and we're going to give that flour some time to cook off so we don't have that floury taste when we go to enjoy our food. So I'm going to cook it down for maybe 2 minutes. I would say it's not going to brown. We don't need any color for this roux. We just need the flour to cook off, or that taste to cook off. When my flour has cooked down enough where I no longer have that flour taste, I'm going to add my broccoli and my carrots, and I like adding my vegetables right into my flour mix because I feel by doing it this way I don't get that clumpy flour texture when you add liquid to it. It could just be me, but I feel like this method works better before adding liquids. Then I'm going in with some water with some bouillon mixed into it, and I'm using equal parts vegetable bouillon as well as chicken bouillon. Of course, you guys can use a broth or a stock, but that's what I had, so that's what I'm using. And I'm just going to mix this up really well and add my seasonings. You can season to taste. I'm adding some garlic powder as well as some cracked black pepper as well as some smoked paprika, and I'm just going to let this cook for about 10 minutes until my vegetables are nice and softened, and then we're going to add the other ingredients. My vegetables have softened, my soup has thickened a bit. Now I'm going to add my milk and my cheddar cheese. So I don't have an exact amount that I added. I'm literally cooking this by heart. But like I said, I will leave a recipe with precise measurements down below for you guys. I'm going to add my cheese and everything. I'm also going to taste it at this point. I love to add my salt when it's almost at the end of cooking. That's where I don't over salt my pot, because a lot of seasonings that I use have a little bit of salt in it, like the bouillon, and I do not want to over salt this dish, especially because we use cheese as well. So I tasted it. I'm going to season a little more with some chicken bouillon, some garlic powder, and a little bit of salt. We're just going to allow this to finish cook, and then we're going to serve it up nice and hot with our yeast rolls, our herbal cheese yeast rolls. Y'all, this was so delicious. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, please remember to give me a big thumbs up. Also subscribe if you're not as yet, and I will see y'all in the next one. So until then, Auf Wiedersehen.